The wife's money is the husband's money. Mike laughs out loud and slaps me on the back. So, what do you want to eat? Beans, cucumber rolls. Eat as much as you want. I shot a look of disdain at him, giddy from all the alcohol. It wasn't even a special occasion like a wedding or a funeral, just a regular Sunday. But Mike had invited his relatives to an upscale restaurant. His parents, his brother and sister's families, uncles, aunts, cousins, 20 people in all. And Mike said he'd pay for everyone. We're pretty well off, so it's fine. Look, we've got an amazing credit card. You've had your fun. Now it's my turn. Mike flaunted my black credit card like it was some kind of badge of honor. But I wasn't about to suck up to him. What? The card's been cancelled. I divorced you 3 months ago. What? It was time to reveal the truth to a stunned Mike. I'm Sarah Sanders, 33 years old. I was married for 5 years, and my daughter Nancy is now 3. Nancy has been in daycare since before she turned 1 so I could work. Daycare is insanely expensive, and Nancy gets sick at least 1 week every month. Of course, I have to beg my company for sudden leave each time. Luckily, Nancy recovers quickly, but when I catch her illness, it takes forever to get better. Before giving birth, I was so healthy that I rarely caught a cold, but my health, constitution, and lifestyle all turned upside down after childbirth. At first, it was tough. The days flew by in a blur, and I can barely remember the specifics of what was so hard. Now that Nancy is 3, I finally have some peace of mind. I use up all my paid leave every year. Mike does the same, but not for Nancy's sake. Oh man, I think I got a fever too. Whenever I got sick, Mike would always put his hand on his forehead and start acting ill. Oh, it's only 97, 9 degrees Fahrenheit, but I know it's going to get worse, seriously bad. I'm going to bed. While I, pale and sick, took care of the now recovered Nancy and prepared dinner. Ugh, we're having noodles tonight. I wanted something hearty, like fried chicken or pork cutlets. Just heat up some canned curry, it's easy. Despite supposedly being sick, he'd complain about the menu. I was sure he was faking it, but if I pointed that out, he'd get even more difficult to deal with. The fake illness would last a day or 2, but his bad mood could last a week. The main symptoms of his bad mood: ignoring everyone. Not just me, but even little Nancy. He'd stomp around the house and slam doors. If I ignored him back, he'd click his tongue and bump into me on purpose. Apparently, his bad mood needed some care with the right words and kindness. A very troublesome condition. I thought our family was the only one suffering from this childish behavior. But it turned out the husbands of my mom friends had the same issue. Men are just like that. Even though they're annoying, we'd be in financial trouble without them. And they're still the fathers of our children. Just make them think they're the boss, and everything's fine. They laughed. Just like that, right? I realized everyone has their own frustrations and worries and just puts up with them. Mike's attitude hadn't changed, and Nancy kept getting sick. My days were busy but relatively peaceful. Then a big incident happened. What? The savings are gone. When I checked Nancy's savings account for the first time in a while, there was only $500 left. I deposit $200 into this account every month. There should have been close to $8,000 by now. And this wasn't a case of theft or fraudulent use of the card. Oh, yeah, I used it. The culprit was none other than Mike. Because I really wanted a motorcycle. Mike confessed, pouting while looking away. He had the attitude of a rebellious elementary school kid caught stealing $10 from his parents' wallet. If he were a child, I could scold him thoroughly, and he'd cry and promise never to do it again. But my anger and disappointment didn't reach Mike at all. He remained sulky. What's the big deal? It's just a motorcycle. I knew you'd oppose it, so I didn't tell you. I demanded that he sell the motorcycle and return Nancy's savings. But Mike shrugged. Can't do it. What? Why? I don't have the bike anymore. I was too shocked to speak to Mike, who was joking around. He had crashed it right after buying it, and it was totaled. The motorcycle cost $30,000. He had spent nearly 4 times the stolen money. Of course, he had taken out a loan to cover the rest. What about your savings, Mike? I asked nervously, and Mike picked his nose. I don't have any. I covered our living expenses, while Mike was responsible for the rent and utilities. We also each paid for our life insurance and phone bills. We agreed to save whatever was left for ourselves when we got married. No savings, how? The rent is too high. Besides, you spend more time at home, so why should I pay for the rent and utilities? He was now blaming me. I held my aching head and whispered, unbelievable. Looking back, I should have decided to divorce him right then. Mike did reflect deeply the next day, and I forgave him this once. With tears and putting head down, he apologized. I'm sorry. I'll never do it again. Thank you for forgiving such a pathetic person like me. I don't need any more allowance. You should manage all my money, Sarah. Believing he had changed, I agreed. I paid off the remaining loan with my savings. As Mike suggested, I took charge of his bank accounts and cards. I cancelled his credit cards and electronic money. Mike's allowance was set at $300 per month. $200 of that went towards repaying Nancy's savings, leaving him with just $100. $100 is barely enough for drinks, but I'm grateful for any allowance. Sarah, you're such a kind wife. I love you. Mike worshipped me like a goddess and eagerly washed dishes and did laundry. Maybe because he had no money, he came home early from work and stayed home on weekends. This meant he spent more time with Nancy, and our family bonds improved significantly. The saying, after the rain, the ground hardens, was true. I fell in love with Mike again for being so helpful and kind with housework and childcare. But it didn't take long to realize that a person's character doesn't change so easily. Hey, the man of the house is back. One night, Mike came home late, drunk and in a great mood. It was the first time in 2 months, as he had no allowance to go out drinking. His senior at work felt sorry for me and treated me. I had been packing him lunches. A senior felt sorry for poor Mike eating homemade lunches and invited him out. It was nice he enjoyed a drink, but it was too We didn't live in a mansion. Our 20-year-old wooden apartment wasn't the place for noise. I just wanted him to be quiet. Shut up. Shut up. You're the noisy one. Why am I the only one who has to put up with this? Did I do something wrong? Had he forgotten he'd stolen Nancy's money? Give me back my cash card. What? You can't. I bet you're the one spending all the money. I know everything. You're taking my money and living it up. It was all in his head. I hated being accused of the same mistakes he made. Don't pretend you don't know. I know your secret. You have that fancy credit card, don't you? Mike cornered me with a threatening voice. I'd had the credit card long before his mess-ups. So what if I had it? Your card is black, right? My senior said. Only the rich can have it. It's just like the one you have. Mike's piercing gaze made me gulp. I felt in danger. But then Mike changed his attitude again. That's not fair. Not fair. I want to splurge with a fancy card too. Why can you have it and I can't? It's not fair. He started throwing a tantrum. There's nothing worse than dealing with a chaotic drunk. Nancy woke up from all the noise. She was too scared to approach her embarrassing father. What? You can't listen to the man of the house. Have some guts. I'll divorce you. Is that what you want? If not, let me use the fancy card. It had only been 2 months since his spending spree was discovered. Clearly, he hadn't truly repented. I moved away from Mike and gently covered Nancy's ears. I'm serious. I'll dump you. I don't need Nancy either. As long as I have the fancy card, I'm fine. My brain felt like it was being squeezed. I felt heat rising through my body. I'd always dismissed his drunken ramblings, but now he'd crossed the line. Not need Nancy. How could he say that about his own daughter? I was trembling with anger, clenching my teeth so hard they might break. I wanted to punch him with my clenched fist. But then Nancy gently held my left hand, bringing me back to my senses. Dad is not needed either. Throw him in the trash. Nancy's unexpected question made my tense body relax instantly. Mike was still ranting about something. Just being a few feet away made his foolishness even more apparent. He was flailing his legs while lying on the floor at the entrance. Did Nancy really need a father like this? 3 months have passed since then. Mike doesn't seem to remember much of that drunken night. But he knows he messed up badly, so he's been distant. He avoids Nancy and me, and stays out late despite having no money. Apparently, he spends time at parks and the supermarket eating areas, but occasionally comes home drunk. He must be charming his senior at work. These past 3 months have been peaceful without major issues. But peaceful might be more like a Cold War since we barely talked and the air was tense. The quiet Mike suddenly broke the silence one day. Hey Sarah, bring Nancy over. Don't say it's uncomfortable. My mother-in-law suddenly called. Apparently, Mike had invited all his relatives to an upscale restaurant. On an ordinary Sunday with no special occasion, Mike invited everyone to an upscale restaurant. His parents, his brother and sister's families, uncles, aunts, cousins, 20 people in total. Since it sounded like they were having a good time, I accepted my mother-in-law's invitation and decided to take Nancy and join them. It was a famous upscale restaurant in the area. We hadn't even gone to a conveyor belt sushi place lately to save money, yet Mike was guzzling alcohol in a spacious private room. Oh, look who's here, Sarah and Nancy. In front of him were shiny pieces of batty tuna, sea urchin, and salmon roe. He made a show of popping a piece of salmon roe into his mouth as we stood frozen at the entrance. I invited them. I thought Sarah might feel out of place, but everyone wants to enjoy good food together. Right. My mother-in-law ushered us to our seats. Mike smirked at me as I sat beside him. Well, whatever. I quietly asked Mike. You invited everyone, right? What's the party for? Nothing, really. So, you're paying since you invited them? Mike stuffed his face with batty tuna and replied, chewing noisily. Yeah, I've got a super card. He pulled out a black card from his pocket. I was appalled that he didn't even keep it in his wallet. What's this? A sudden quiz. The answer was obvious. My credit card. Mike's face wrinkled in laughter. Correct. As a reward, you get to eat sushi too. I felt nothing but disgust for Mike, who was proudly showing off. That's my credit card. I started to say, but Mike covered my mouth. He attempted a wink, even though he wasn't handsome enough to pull it off. The wife's money is the husband's money. A chill ran down my spine. So, what do you want to eat? Beans, cucumber rolls. Eat as much as you want. I shot a look of disdain at Mike, who laughed loudly and slapped my back. I don't want anything. Don't be shy. Are you scared because you're cheap? We're well off. It's fine. We've got an amazing card. You've had your fun. Now it's my turn. Mike flaunted the black card again like it was a badge of honor. But I wasn't about to suck up. The card's been cancelled. I divorced you 3 months ago. What? It was time to reveal the truth to a stunned Mike. You had that card. I thought it was stolen because I couldn't find it since yesterday. I cancelled it because it was used fraudulently at the corner shop. Whenever my credit card is used, I get a notification on my phone. Last night, there was a $2 charge at the nearby corner shop. He probably bought a can of hard lemonade to see if the card worked without any issues. What? Cancelled? Yeah, thieves are scary. Oh, you were the thief. The culprit was closer than I thought, even scarier. Mike couldn't hide his confusion as I calmly spoke. So, does that mean this card is useless? Yes, it does. Mike blinked repeatedly, visibly panicked. Don't you have other credit cards? No. What about my card? We cancelled it when we discovered the unauthorized spending, remember? With no options left, Mike stood up and shouted. Then what am I supposed to do? Don't you have savings? It's your responsibility. Go withdraw money now. Mike looked down at me and ordered, fidgeting anxiously. No, why should I? Mike's face turned red with anger. Our argument drew everyone's attention. Seeing their concerned faces, Mike bit his lip. After boasting and gathering his relatives, he couldn't admit he had no money. Not wanting to escalate the situation, Mike silently reached into my bag, took my wallet, and opened it. Stop it. Ignoring my protest, Mike took out my bank card. Feeling relieved that he had a way to pay, Mike smirked and rubbed the back of his head. Sorry, everyone. She accidentally cancelled the card. What a pain. Pointing at me with his thumb, he gave a sheepish grin. Don't worry, I'll run to the ATM and get some cash. Enjoy the food. He acted like a forgiving husband, covering for his wife's mistake. But that wasn't the truth, and I wasn't going to let him go to the ATM. Wait, thief. I firmly grabbed Mike's wrist. Thief. I looked like a terrifying wife. My mother-in-law and other relatives were frozen in shock. Someone dropped their chopsticks, and the clattering sound echoed. First the credit card, now you're stealing the debit card. Mike avoided my gaze, glancing nervously at the relatives. Even now, he was worried about appearances. Don't say things that sound so bad. Mike laughed awkwardly and put his arm around my shoulder. His alcohol-laden breath hit my face. Calling your husband a thief is harsh. You use my money too. What's wrong with family using each other's money? He was trying to paint me as the villain. Can't you let me have some spending money for once? I can't even go out drinking. I bring a packed lunch and a water bottle to work. I can't even buy coffee from a vending machine. You take all my money. It's pathetic. It's hard. How much more do I have to endure? Tears welled up in Mike's eyes. I was surprised by his performance and widened my eyes. Maybe my expression was too exaggerated, because all the relatives were now giving me cold looks. I heard someone whisper, "Whoa, poor Mike." She seemed like such a nice person. You never know. Yes, you never know. So let me explain what a jerk Mike truly is. Mike can't use money freely because it's his own fault. He used Nancy's savings to buy a $30,000 motorcycle. Everyone gasped and looked at Mike. He took out a loan for the rest after using up Nancy's savings, then wrecked the bike in an accident. Plus, he spent his entire salary as pocket money with no savings left. I had to take over his loan payments. Mike shook his head slightly, looking pale. The relatives were left with their mouths open. It was silent despite the 20 people present. Only my voice broke the silence. Can you imagine giving your entire paycheck to someone who screwed up so badly? I'm just managing it responsibly. Is that hoarding? I make your lunch and prepare your water bottle. Even though I work full-time, I deserve gratitude, not complaints. As I finished my rant, Mike's eyes rolled back slightly, and he staggered. My mother-in-law quickly supported him. Mike looked up at her weakly and buried his face in her chest like a child. "You didn't have to be so harsh. Can't you consider my position? It's humiliating in front of everyone." He was still playing the victim. He was trying to get my mother-in-law on his side. But my mother-in-law looked confused and stayed silent. "Everyone, don't be fooled by Sarah. I'm really the one suffering here." Mike pleaded with the relatives, tears in his eyes. He sniffled and then adopted a serious expression. "It's true I used Nancy's savings. I deeply regret that and will repay it, no matter how long it takes, but..." Mike put his hand on his chest and slightly hunched his back. He sighed deeply and looked up at the ceiling. His over-the-top performance was irritating. But I was curious about what speech he had prepared, so I listened for a bit. "I didn't have any money. I couldn't even afford to buy a motorcycle. I work hard every day. So why can't I buy something for my hobby once in a while?" Mike's anguished shout elicited sympathetic looks from the relatives. "We're not poor since both Sarah and I work, but because of Sarah's penny pinching, we're always restricted. Eating out means food courts or family diners, and outings are just to the local zoo. It's a dull and boring life." Maybe activities suited to little Nancy didn't interest Mike. Plus, we'd been saving more recently, thanks to someone wasting $30,000. As I stared in disbelief, Mike suddenly glared at me. The truth is, his fierce look made me brace myself. I was deceived by this woman. He pointed his finger at me as if to say, "You're the culprit." It felt like a scene from a crime drama, and even though he was full of intensity, I was just confused. I frowned and responded irritably, "What?" The relative's cold stares focused on me. "You made me put up with everything while you were enjoying yourself, right?" "What are you talking about? You spent your salary as you pleased and saved nothing. I was the one saving and living frugally." Mike snorted. "What saving? Was it really necessary?" Mike pulled out the infamous credit card from his pocket. He raised it above his head for all to see. "She's hiding money. Is she skimming off the salary, or did she win the lottery? Whatever it is, she's been deceiving me and hoarding money. This credit card is the proof." Mike held up the matte black card for everyone to see. The relatives were confused as Mike explained. "This isn't just any credit card. It's a black card, a super exclusive card that only the wealthy elite can get." Mike, breathing heavily, spoke with thunderous intensity. "So we're actually rich. There's no need to save. And she shouldn't complain about 1 or 2 motorcycles. She's been living it up while making me suffer." The relatives were wide-eyed with shock. I stood beside them, equally stunned. "Okay, I see." Mike had a huge misunderstanding. "We're not rich at all. Don't lie, my senior has the same black card. His wife's a CEO who makes tons of money. You must be doing the same, hiding money and living lavishly." Mike was excited, but I replied calmly. "My credit card just has a black design. It's not a black card. It's a regular credit card anyone can get." Since Mike didn't seem to understand, I pulled up the credit card's website on my phone. "See, just a black design. Stop jumping to conclusions." Mike grabbed my phone, comparing the displayed card to the one he held. "What?" His shoulders slumped, and he stood in shock. "I've used the credit card for grocery shopping, living it up, spending $200 on groceries. And household items for the family is not living it up. Unlike you, I've never secretly bought an expensive motorcycle." Mike mistook my credit card for the prestigious black card his senior bragged about. After wasting Nancy's savings on a motorcycle, he probably thought $30,000 was nothing and that I was hoarding money. Being called out for buying the bike and losing financial freedom made him resent me. Sorry to disappoint, but it's just an ordinary credit card. We're not well off like you think. No way. Mike's hand trembled as he dropped the card. How do you plan to pay for this? The table was filled with expensive sushi. Several bottles of alcohol were empty, and most of the relatives had slightly flushed faces. I couldn't even imagine what the bill would be, since I usually only go to conveyor belt sushi places. Oh, well, with the credit card. I told you I cancelled it because it was stolen. I cut in over Mike's words. Mike's mouth opened and closed, and then he spoke in a strained voice. Please, can you withdraw some money? No, I answered immediately. Without a hint of compassion, Mike smiled faintly in despair. Then, what should I do? It wasn't my concern. I didn't even feel like responding. Mike, looking defeated, slumped into his seat and began a pitiful, tearful excuse. What could I do? I've been holding back for so long. I just wanted to have some fun and show off a little. He ran his fingers through his hair and held his head, pouring out his feelings dramatically. Sarah takes my paycheck and gives me a tiny allowance, so I can't even go out drinking. I have to get my seniors to buy me drinks. Even my juniors have started treating me. Isn't that pathetic? Mike sighed and turned to me. I admit it was wrong to use the savings to buy the motorcycle, but is it really something to get so mad about? You keep saying it was Nancy's money, but she's only 3. It was her parents' money first, which means it's my money too, right? Any pretense of repentance was a sham. He might have seemed remorseful for a while, but his selfish nature hadn't changed. Being kind to him only made him more arrogant. So, I showed no mercy. No, it was my money, not yours. I saved it from my earnings. You never saved a single cent, so how dare you say that? I coldly retorted. Mike flinched and recoiled. That's harsh. You don't have to be so cold. We're family, so it's weird to separate Nancy's and Sarah's money. Family money belongs to everyone, so I have the right to use it too. Mike shamelessly asserted. I was fed up and repeated the crucial fact. You have no rights because you're not part of my family. What? Mike tilted his head in confusion. You called me names and demanded a divorce. You even said you didn't want Nancy. What when? Mike's eyes darted around. He had ranted about divorce the night he came home after being treated to drinks by his senior. He had drunkenly lashed out at Nancy and me. You don't remember? We divorced because you pushed for it. What? I had recorded the scene of us filling out the divorce papers on my phone, just in case. I showed it to him. Is it wrong to buy a motorcycle? No, it's not. I'm living for myself. A wife and kid are just in the way. I'm getting a divorce. In the video, Mike, looking directly at the camera, clearly stated this. The Mike in the video was sharp and determined, but the current Mike was pale and trembling. Oh, I guess we did get divorced. It seemed the memory came back to him. Mike, already pale, turned even whiter. So we really did get divorced? He asked hesitantly, and I nodded deeply. Yes, we did. We've been strangers for 3 months now. No way. I accepted the sudden divorce, but I couldn't just leave immediately. My parents lived far away, and I couldn't rely on them, so I needed to find a new place. Fortunately, Mike had almost no memory of the night after the divorce and acted normally. So I decided to take my time and prepare everything thoroughly before leaving. It wasn't just about me. Nancy was with me too. I've rented an apartment close to my workplace and Nancy's daycare. We'll be moving out today. Mike reached out to stop me. Wait, just because I spent some money, I've been paying it back. It's not just about the money. You never cared about your family. You ignored me when I was sick and barely took care of Nancy. You were always self-centered. You made no difference whether you were here or not." Mike had no response. Ignoring his teary eyes, I turned to the relatives and said hello. The relatives, who had been frozen in shock, finally came to their senses. They exchanged glances and wore grim expressions. "I'm sorry for causing a scene." I looked at my mother-in-law, whose face was unreadable. I held no grudge against my in-laws or relatives and felt sorry for involving them in our marital issues. "I'm sorry, mother-in-law. You've always been kind to me. I regret that it ended this way." She didn't respond. I was just the daughter-in-law. No matter how good our relationship had been, her son, Mike, would always come first. I again nodded and took Nancy's hand to leave, but I stumbled as something held me back. Mike had grabbed my ankle. Lying on the floor, Mike looked like a zombie. "Wait!" I had no intention of reconciling. I looked at him coldly. But what came out of Mike's mouth was even more pathetic. "Please, just pay the bill here." It was beyond pitiful. I felt my strength drain away in disappointment. My mother-in-law gently released Mike's grip on my ankle. Then she spoke in a soft voice. "I will pay the bill here." Mike looked up sharply, sniffing and showing a hint of relief. But his relief was short-lived. "Don't misunderstand. I'm only covering for now." "What?" "If we don't pay now, it will trouble the restaurant. You will pay me back properly," my mother-in-law stated firmly. Mike looked back and forth between her and my father-in-law in confusion. "Right, dear?" my mother-in-law asked my father-in-law, who nodded firmly. It seemed they weren't on Mike's side. My mother-in-law pulled out some paper and a pen from her bag and started writing a promissory note. "Here, Mike, sign this." "A promissory note. We're family. You don't have to treat me like a debtor." Mike refused to take the pen from my mother-in-law. It fell to the floor. "Family is a convenient excuse. You might say you won't pay back the debt because we're family. I don't trust you, so sign the note. Being family doesn't mean you can get away with everything." My mother-in-law's previously calm tone became harsh, and Mike flinched. Tears welled up in his tightly closed eyes. "Yes?" My mother-in-law gently placed her hand on his trembling one. Her stern demeanor softened as she spoke kindly. "I won't charge you interest, since we're still family." Mike nodded gratefully, sitting up straight. Despite his mistakes, his parents showed him compassion. While I couldn't forgive Mike, it made sense his parents couldn't completely abandon him. With a serene smile, my mother-in-law prepared another paper and wrote something on it. "Sign this before the promissory note." It was a written pledge to repay the debt. The amount was $30,000, and the recipient was me. "Mother-in-law, this is." Her smile remained gentle, but her words were firm. "You can't be left with a debt just because you're divorced. He needs to pay it back." I mentioned I was already deducting it from his salary for about 6 months, but she just smiled. "That's just interest. Make him repay it in full." I'd never been so scared of a smile before. The pledge stated that the interest was 10% every 10 days. She was strict. "Mike, promise to repay Sarah first. She's no longer family, so you can't trouble her anymore." Mike's hand trembled as he reluctantly took the pen. With my mother-in-law watching, he shakily signed his name on both promissory notes. Exhausted, Mike looked like an empty shell. My mother-in-law's smile faded. She looked serious and apologetic, with my father-in-law following suit. "Sarah, we're sorry for the trouble our foolish son has caused. I had come here expecting to be treated as an enemy. I didn't think anyone would take my side." Yet here were my in-laws apologizing to me. I felt tears well up. We're sorry Mike caused you so much pain. We didn't realize, and we're truly sorry. Overwhelmed, I wiped the tears from my eyes. I wanted to thank them, but before I could, Mike spoke again. In a muffled voice, he hesitantly said something. Why me? He didn't seem to feel any shame anymore, and said something outrageous. Let's split the bill equally. Silence followed. It felt like time stopped for a few minutes. What? Confusion spread. An older male relative broke the silence. Split the bill? No way. You invited us here. We're happy to be your guests. Thanks. His gratitude was dripping with sarcasm. Mike's body seemed to deflate. Following the older man, other relatives chimed in with thanks for the meal, and it was delicious. Even the relatives, not just his parents, had abandoned him. Mike lay on the floor, looking like a dirty, lifeless rag. He watched me and Nancy leave the room with unfocused eyes, unable to speak or move. This was goodbye for real. As I had declared, I left the apartment I shared with Mike immediately. Nancy and I moved into our new place, ready to start our lives over. I had never relied on Mike for child rearing, so becoming a single mother wouldn't be a big adjustment. It's only been 6 days since he signed that pledge. There's no interest. Right. My mother-in-law's threat had clearly worked. He had borrowed the money to pay me back in full. That debt would have interest, but it wouldn't be as outrageous as 10% every 10 days. Since Mike had no savings and had squandered money, there was no division of assets. I was relieved to have protected the money I had saved up. Getting the $30,000 back meant I could completely sever ties with Mike. However, even after paying back the money, Mike still seemed to have something to say. I'm sorry. If it had been just an apology, it would have been fine, but he was aiming for reconciliation. Can we start over? I quit my job because it got uncomfortable there. He had humiliated himself in front of relatives, but he must have also done something at work. I lost my place. I paid back the money, so can't you forgive me? His senior had been kind enough to treat him to drinks, but eventually they stopped. Mike started inviting various people out for drinks, only to claim he had no money when it was time to pay. It was awful behavior, but Mike thought he was just having fun. He said he invited his coworkers when he first got my credit card. But after all the deceit, no one stood by him. Mike's reputation had plummeted, and he wasn't trusted anymore. It was entirely his own fault. You've been abandoned by your relatives and co-workers. I don't want to see your face either. I didn't sugarcoat it, and Mike collapsed to the ground in shock. He clutched his chest as if in pain, even though I hadn't touched him. He was always a good actor. It was probably another one of his lies. I glanced at his exaggerated display and left. Living with just Nancy isn't much different from before. I realized that Mike's presence was unnecessary. In fact, it's a relief not to have to take care of him anymore. But sometimes I feel weak. Wow, a 102-degree fever. This is tough. When I'm sick, my body and mind weaken and anxiety creeps in. Even though I feel awful, I have to get up and prepare meals for Nancy. However, as I tried to get out of bed, Nancy tucked the blanket back around me. It's okay. You can stay in bed, Mom. Are you all right? Do you want some ice cream or jelly? 3-year-old Nancy was worried about me. Do you want some ice cream or jelly? Was what I always asked her when she was sick. As long as I have you, I'll be fine. You're my magic medicine. Nancy. Really, I'm glad. I hugged my compassionate little girl tightly. Loving her doesn't mean I have to sacrifice myself. I need to get well quickly so she doesn't worry anymore. Nancy and I will support each other as we go through life together.